Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going to be talking about communication mechanisms.
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah, and it's not, like just casual chit-chat.
Right.
These are like structured interactions designed to really amp up communication, especially in groups.
Yeah. What's really fascinating about this is that we're going to be looking at these mechanisms like engineers.
Yeah.
Almost like we're looking at the blueprints for a chemical plant.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
So I've got research papers, case studies. We've even got some personal anecdotes to dig through.
Excellent.
We're going to be unpacking things like Biblio Battle.
Okay.
Which is that book recommendation game I'm sure some of you have heard of.
Yeah.
And even something called tokenized speaking rights.
Interesting.
It's basically carbon trading, but for conversations.
I like it.
We're going to really try to break down, how do these systems actually function? What makes them tick?
Right.
And how could they even apply to your own life?
Yeah.
Whether it's at work, in your community, or even just how you learn new things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so to kind of kick things off,
yeah,
let's borrow an idea from one of our sources.
Okay.
And picture communication as a system.
Right.
Kind of like a chemical plant.
I like where this is going.
So we've got inputs, we've got processes, and we've got outputs.
It's such a powerful analogy because it really helps you kind of see all these different moving parts.
Right.
Just like a plant needs specific ingredients to make a product, communication needs the right elements too.
So our inputs would be like the people involved.
Right. Yeah.
Each person brings their own unique knowledge, their own skills.
Exactly.
And then you've got the topic at hand.
Right.
And of course, the ever-present factor of time.
Oh, there's never enough time, is there?
Never enough time.
Right.
Okay, so then the plant processes are all those interactions. The discussions, the individual contributions, those brainstorming sessions. And the way those processes play out depend on sort of the rules of the game.
Mm-hmm.
So, are there guidelines? Are there incentives? What kind of feedback are people receiving?
That's right, because all of that shapes the way a conversation actually flows.
And then the outputs.
Yeah.
It's not just like what decision did we make or, what ideas were generated.
Right.
But also, and this is where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
How did the participants themselves change?
Oh, I like that.
Did they learn something new? Did their perspective shift in some way?
Right.
Sometimes the most valuable outcome is how we grow through those interactions.
Absolutely. We fixate so much on, what gets decided in a meeting.
Yeah.
But what about how the people in that room are transformed? I mean, that's a really valuable output, too.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
So it's like we're all, part of this big complex reaction, and we come out the other side maybe a little bit different.
I love that.
Now, these communication spaces,
right.
They're not like simple machines.
No.
They're more like living ecosystems.
Definitely.
And the research really emphasizes that they're autonomous and decentralized, meaning each person kind of acts independently.
Interesting.
And that's where these concepts of self-closure and self-determination come in.
Okay.
So self-closure basically means we can't read each other's minds.
Right.
We're all operating with incomplete information
exactly
about what others, actually know or believe.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost like we're all playing poker.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out everyone else's hand.
Exactly.
And that leads to self-determination.
Okay.
Where people are choosing, do I speak up?
Right.
Do I stay silent?
Sure.
What information do I share? And they're making those decisions based on their own motivations.
Right.
Which we don't always know.
Yeah. Have you ever been in a meeting where it just felt like everyone was holding back?
Oh, yeah. All the time.
Yeah. It's so common.
But if we can recognize that everyone is coming to the table with their own unique perspective and motivations, that can help us design communication systems that encourage people to open up.
That's right.
And share. Okay, so we've got this foundation.
Yeah.
Communication is this complex system with humans at the heart of it.
Right.
Now let's see how these ideas actually play out in a specific example.
Okay.
One of our sources takes a deep dive into a game called Biblio Battle.
Ah, yes. Biblio Battle.
Have you heard of this?
I have.
So for those who haven't, it's this book recommendation game where everyone brings a book that they love.
That's right.
And they present it to the group, and then everyone votes on a champ book.
It's so simple, but it's so effective.
Yeah, it does sound almost deceptively simple.
Yeah.
But is it really better than, say, using like an algorithm to recommend books? Some of the research suggests that it is.
That is kind of surprising, isn't it?
It is.
You'd think an algorithm with tons of data could figure out exactly what we like.
Right.
But the research found that BiblioBattle tends to outperform algorithms when recommending, diverse and interesting books.
So what's that secret sauce?
Right.
What's going on there?
Well, it seems like the personal touch is a key ingredient.
Yeah.
When people present their books in BiblioBattle, they're naturally weaving in these personal stories and connections.
Oh, okay.
So it's not just, a dry summary.
Yeah.
It becomes something much more engaging.
Uh-huh.
It's about, shared experiences and how a book resonated with them on a personal level.
So it's not just about finding a good book.
Yeah.
It's about connecting with other people through those books.
Yeah, exactly.
And I love that BiblioBattle can be adapted to all sorts of different settings.
Yes.
I read about it being used in, small community gatherings to big events and even classroom workshops.
Yeah, it's a testament to, how if you understand the underlying design principles,
Right.
you can adapt and apply these mechanisms to different contexts.
So BiblioBattle is clearly leveraging those concepts we talked about earlier.
Right.
Self-closure, self-determination.
Yeah.
How does that play out in practice?
Okay, so remember, the whole point of BiblioBattle is that everyone wants their book to be the champ book.
Right.
That incentivizes them to pick a book they genuinely think the group will find interesting, even though they don't know everyone's taste perfectly.
So they're trying to anticipate what others might enjoy.
That's right.
Without being able to read minds.
Exactly. That's self-closure in action.
I see.
And that champ book goal also pushes people to deliver a really compelling presentation, which helps them develop those communication and persuasion skills.
Right, right.
And because people are sharing these personal connections to the books, it sparks more genuine interest and discussion.
Right.
In fact, the research even analyzed speech patterns and found that BiblioBattle participants naturally weave in more personal stories than you'd see in, just a typical book review.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's like you're getting a glimpse into someone's inner world, which makes that recommendation so much more compelling.
Absolutely.
Have you ever participated in a BiblioBattle yourself?
I haven't, but I'm definitely adding it to my list now.
Yeah.
Seems like such a fun and engaging way to connect with people.
Yeah, over shared interests.
Exactly.
So I'm intrigued, too. What about you, listener?
Yeah.
Have you tried BiblioBattle?
Have you seen it in action?
Can you imagine how it could be adapted to your own workplace or community?
Right.
What kind of conversations and connections could it spark?
It's a question worth pondering.
Definitely. Now, we've explored BiblioBattle in some depth.
Yeah.
But there's a whole universe of other communication mechanisms out there.
That's right.
Each with its own unique approach.
Absolutely.
So let's broaden our view a little bit.
Okay.
And take a look at a few more.
Sounds good.
Just to kind of get a taste of what's possible.
I'm excited.
Let's start with something completely different. Parliamentary debate.
Ooh, okay.
I've always been fascinated by that style of debate.
Yeah.
It seems so structured.
Yeah.
So formal.
It is, and that structure is actually one of its strengths.
Okay.
Parliamentary debate involves these really structured arguments with clearly defined roles.
Yeah.
So you have a government side and an opposition side.
Right.
Each presenting their case and then engaging in rebuttals.
So it really encourages not only like the ability to articulate your own argument, but also to think critically.
Yes.
And respond to opposing viewpoints.
Exactly. It's like a mental workout for your logic and argumentation skills.
Yeah.
Which are valuable, in all sorts of situations.
Right. Not just formal debates.
Not just debates.
Okay, so parliamentary debate is all about structure and logic. What about a mechanism that focuses more on creative expression?
Okay.
And kind of finding your voice.
Interesting.
I know we have some research on speech training and what are called enactment workshops.
Right. These workshops use role-playing and acting techniques to help people express themselves more confidently and explore different perspectives.
It sounds fun.
Yeah.
Maybe even a little liberating.
It can be.
To kind of step outside your comfort zone and tap into a different side of yourself.
Absolutely.
So is there any research on how effective these workshops are?
There is, and it's actually quite interesting.
Right.
Studies show that using role-playing can actually help people generate more creative ideas and solutions. And by embodying a different role, they kind of unlock these new ways of thinking and seeing the world.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
Sometimes we get so stuck in our own heads that we need a little push to shake things up.
Right.
and see things from a fresh perspective.
Exactly. And speaking of shaking things up,
Okay.
let's talk about a mechanism that tackles a problem we've probably all experienced
Okay.
in meetings.
Wow.
Uneven participation.
Oh, yeah.
You always have those few people who dominate the conversation,
Right.
while others barely get a word in edgewise.
It's so frustrating.
It is. So is there a way to design a system that levels the playing field?
Right. What's the solution to that?
Well, one intriguing approach is tokenized speaking rights.
Okay.
Remember that carbon trading analogy from earlier?
Yes.
This is kind of like that,
Right.
but for conversation.
Okay.
So each participant gets a certain number of tokens, and they have to spend a token each time they want to speak.
So it's like literally putting a price on speaking up.
It is.
How does that actually change the dynamics of a conversation?
Well, you might be surprised to hear this,
Okay.
but research suggests that introducing this kind of market for speaking rights can lead to more balanced participation.
Really?
Yes.
That's fascinating.
And more efficient meetings overall.
Wow. I would love to hear more about how that actually works.
Yeah.
It seems counterintuitive that limiting speaking would encourage more people to participate.
It is counterintuitive.
Yeah.
But that's what's so cool about studying these mechanisms. You know, we uncover these surprising insights into how human behavior can be shaped by design.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
So we've touched on bibliobattle, we've talked about parliamentary debate, we've talked about enactment workshops, and even tokenized speaking rights.
It's amazing, isn't it, the range of approaches out there?
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
But is there some common thread that connects all of them? Is there some sort of underlying framework that can help us make sense of it all?
That is the million-dollar question.
It is.
And that's where this idea of design principles comes in.
Okay.
So researchers believe that just as genes determine a plant's height or its flower color, certain design principles might be the hidden code
Okay.
behind what makes a communication method really thrive.
So it's like we're searching for the communication genome, so to speak.
Exactly.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
So what are some of the design variables
Right.
that researchers are investigating? What's really making these communication mechanisms tick?
Well, they're exploring things like how speaking time is allocated,
Okay.
the role of role-playing, how arguments are structured,
Right.
how opposing viewpoints are positioned, the flexibility of arguments,
Gotcha.
and of course the goals and the decision-making processes involved.
It's a complex puzzle for sure,
It is.
but the implications are huge.
Absolutely.
If we can crack the code, so to speak, we could design even more effective ways to communicate and learn together.
Absolutely. And remember, this is a field that's constantly evolving.
Yeah.
There's so much more to discover and explore.
Well, this has been an incredible deep dive so far.
It has.
We've learned so much about how communication can be intentionally designed.
That's right.
From, casual book recommendations to high-stakes debates.
It's been a fascinating journey.
It has. But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I'm curious to hear what's been swirling in your mind throughout this whole exploration.
Okay.
What's like one big takeaway that wasn't explicitly mentioned, but has really stuck with you?
You know, we've talked a lot about the tangible outputs of communication.
Yeah.
The decisions made, the ideas generated, the champ book chosen.
Right, yeah.
But what if the most valuable output is the change within ourselves? The way our perspectives shift,
Yeah.
the empathy we develop, the growth we experience through these interactions.
Right.
What if the true measure of successful communication is how it transforms us
Wow.
as individuals and as a collective?
That's a powerful thought.
Yeah.
It's not just about what we achieve through communication,
No.
but about who we become in the process.
Exactly. Yeah, it really makes you think differently about it, doesn't it?
It does.
Like what if we saw communication as this catalyst
Yeah.
for, personal and collective growth?
Right.
How would that change the way we build communities
Yeah.
or even make decisions?
Yeah, that's a really interesting way to think about it.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've been talking about design principles, in a broad sense.
Uh-huh.
But I want to get into the nitty-gritty.
Okay.
What are some of those specific variables
Yeah.
that researchers are really investigating?
Right.
What is making these communication mechanisms actually tick?
Well, one of the most fundamental
Okay.
and maybe even controversial variables is how speaking time is allocated.
Okay, so how much time each person actually gets to speak
Right.
and how that time is structured.
Yeah. How's it divvied up?
that can have a huge impact
Huge.
on how the conversation flows and what comes out of it.
Yeah, we've all been in those meetings where one person dominates.
Oh, yeah.
And everyone else is just like...
Frustrated,
unheard.
Yeah.
But then there are those meetings where, everyone gets a chance to contribute.
Right.
And the energy is completely different.
It is. And there are all these different approaches to managing speaking time.
Right.
Each with its own, pluses and minuses.
Pros and cons, exactly.
We talked about tokenized speaking rights earlier, where people literally have to spend tokens to speak up. That's one way to ensure everyone gets a fair share of the conversation.
It is. It's a way to kind of level the playing field.
So instead of just relying on social cues or hoping that the loudest person doesn't take over, you're creating a system where everyone actually has an equal opportunity to contribute. What other approaches are there?
Well, there's the classic talking stick method.
Oh, yeah.
Where only the person holding the stick is allowed to speak.
Right.
That can be effective in certain settings.
Right.
Or you could have a designated facilitator who ensures everyone gets a turn, even the quieter voices in the room.
I like that.
Yeah.
And even setting like time limits for individual contributions.
Right.
That can help keep things moving.
Absolutely.
And prevent any one person from monopolizing the conversation.
Right. It's all about creating that space for everyone to be heard.
Yeah.
It's not about silencing anyone. It's about making sure that every voice has a chance.
It's like creating a level playing field for ideas.
Exactly. And the best approach, it's always going to depend on the context, the goals of the communication space, the dynamics of the group.
There's no one-size-fits-all.
No.
Which makes it even more interesting to explore.
It does.
Now, another design variable that really caught my eye is this role of role-playing.
Okay.
I'm fascinated by how stepping into different roles can actually shift the way we communicate. Is it really as powerful as it sounds?
It can be incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
And it can be used in so many different ways.
Yeah.
We talked about enactment workshops earlier, where you're embodying, different characters and scenarios.
Yeah.
But role-playing can also be much more subtle. For example, you could assign specific roles in a meeting, like, devil's advocate or facilitator.
I like that by explicitly taking on a role. You're encouraged to kind of step outside of your usual perspective and see things from a different angle.
Absolutely.
It's like putting on a different pair of glasses, and suddenly the world looks different.
Exactly.
Do you think that can actually help people overcome biases and generate new ideas?
Absolutely. One study found that simply by role-playing as members of a different social group, participants developed a greater understanding and appreciation for that group's perspectives. It's like, walking a mile in someone else's shoes, but in this case, you're talking and thinking as them too.
It's amazing to think that role-playing can change not just how we think, but how we feel about others.
Yeah, it's not just about acting.
Right.
It's about, expanding our empathy and our understanding.
That's the real power of it.
It is.
Okay, let's shift gears a little bit.
Right.
And talk about another crucial design variable, logical structure.
Okay.
How we organize and connect ideas within a communication space. Can have a huge impact on clarity, comprehension, and even the ability to reach consensus.
Absolutely.
I mean, it seems intuitive that if a conversation is all over the place, with people jumping from topic to topic, it's going to be really hard to make any progress.
It is. You need that focus.
But how do you build that logical structure into a communication mechanism?
Well, different mechanisms use different tools. Some employ, turn-taking time limits, specific roles to guide the conversation. Others might use visual aids or even physical arrangements to create a sense of order. Think about how different a brainstorming session feels when you're all huddled around a whiteboard versus, scattered around a room.
Yeah, and even in our everyday conversations, we use these subtle cues and structures.
We do.
To keep things flowing. We wait for a pause before speaking. We signal, agreement or disagreement. We ask clarifying questions.
It's like there's this invisible choreography guiding our interactions.
It really is fascinating.
It is.
And it highlights how even, casual conversations are still operating within this system of design principles, whether we're conscious of them or not.
Whether we realize it or not.
So we've covered speaking time, role-playing, and logical structure. What else is on that list of design variables that researchers are exploring?
Well, this next one is particularly interesting.
Okay.
The positioning of opposing viewpoints.
Okay, so how a communication mechanism handles disagreement and conflict.
Exactly.
That can make or break its effectiveness.
It can, because if you shut down opposing viewpoints or create an environment where people are afraid to disagree, you're basically stifling creativity and innovation.
You're shutting down the possibility of, coming up with new ideas and solutions.
Right. But if you can find a way to embrace and explore those disagreements constructively, that can lead to deeper understanding and even stronger relationships.
Right. So how do different mechanisms approach this?
Well, one way to think about it is in terms of polarization.
Okay.
So some mechanisms, like parliamentary debate, are designed to really emphasize and amplify those opposing viewpoints.
Okay.
It's like setting up a battle of ideas, which can be engaging, but it also risks, entrenching people in their positions, creating this us versus them mentality.
It's like those cable news debates.
Exactly.
Where everyone's shouting past each other.
Right.
It makes for good TV, but does it actually help anyone understand the issue better?
Good question. Good question.
Yeah.
Other mechanisms, though, like bibliobattle, take a much more collaborative approach.
Okay.
So multiple viewpoints are presented, they're explored, but without the need for a clear winner or loser.
I see.
It's more about sharing perspectives and finding that common ground.
It's like there's this spectrum of polarization, and different mechanisms fall at different points along that spectrum.
That's a good way to think about it.
Yeah, and, the best approach probably depends on the goals of the conversation.
It does.
If you're trying to make a decision,
a
more polarized approach might be helpful. But if you're trying to build relationships, or, really understand a complex issue, a more collaborative approach might be more effective.
Exactly. It's all about choosing the right tool for the job.
Right.
And it's not just about the initial positioning of those viewpoints,
right,
but how those viewpoints are allowed to evolve throughout the conversation.
Yeah.
And that brings us to another important variable, the flexibility of arguments.
So how much wiggle room do people have to, change their mind or modify their arguments as the conversation unfolds?
Right.
How much can those initial positions actually shift and evolve?
Exactly. Some mechanisms like parliamentary debate are very strict about maintaining those initial positions throughout the debate.
Okay.
Now, that helps ensure clarity and focus.
Yeah.
But it can also limit the potential for creativity and finding new solutions.
It's like everyone's locked into their starting position.
Yeah.
And they're not allowed to move.
Right. But in other mechanisms like brainstorming sessions or open discussions, there's a lot more fluidity.
Right.
People can build on each other's ideas, modify their positions, even completely change their minds as new information emerges.
It's like the difference between a carefully choreographed dance and a free-flowing improvisation.
I like that.
Yeah. Both have their place.
Right.
Depending on the desired outcome.
Exactly. Too much flexibility can lead to chaos.
Right.
And a lack of focus.
Right.
But too little flexibility can stifle that creativity and innovation.
It's all about finding that sweet spot.
It is.
Between structure and fluidity.
Absolutely.
This is making me realize just how much thought and intention goes into designing effective communication spaces.
It's not something that just happens.
No, it doesn't just happen.
It's a craft, an art that requires a deep understanding of human behavior.
Yeah. It's a fascinating field.
It is.
And we're still learning so much about how to do it well.
Absolutely. Now, before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, there's one more design variable I think we should touch on, and it might be the most important one of all, goals and decision-making processes.
Okay, so what is the communication space actually trying to achieve?
Right.
And how are decisions made within that space? How do those factors shape the conversation?
Well, every communication mechanism has a purpose.
Right.
Whether it's to generate ideas, solve problems, make decisions, build relationships, or simply to share information. And the way goals are defined and decisions are made can have a huge impact on how effective that mechanism is.
So, for example, in bibliobattle, the goal is to choose a champ book.
Exactly.
And that drives that whole process.
The whole thing.
From the book selections to the presentations to the voting.
That's right. But in a brainstorming session,
Yeah.
the goal might be to generate as many ideas as possible
Right.
without worrying about, whether they're good or bad.
Good or bad, just get them out there.
Just get them out there.
Exactly. And the decision-making process can also vary widely.
Right.
So in some mechanisms, decisions are made by majority vote. In others, they might be made by consensus.
Right.
Or by a designated leader.
Exactly.
Sometimes you might even leave it up to chance.
It's true.
It's like we're building this toolkit for communication.
Yeah.
With all these different tools for different purposes. And by understanding, those design principles behind each tool, we can choose the right one for the job.
Right.
And use it effectively to achieve our goals.
Exactly. And just like with any toolkit, it's important to know not only how to use the tools, but also when to use them.
Right.
Sometimes the best communication mechanism is simply to have an open and honest conversation.
Right.
Without any formal structure or rules.
It's true. Sometimes the simplest approach is best.
Yeah.
But having this broader understanding of these communication mechanisms and these design principles can help us make more informed choices.
It can.
About how to approach different situations.
Absolutely.
Which brings us back to that thought-provoking question we were discussing earlier.
Yeah.
What if the most valuable output of communication is the change within ourselves?
It's a powerful idea, isn't it?
It is.
We're not just transmitting information, we're shaping each other.
Yeah.
And ourselves.
Through these interactions.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes you think about, how we approach every conversation in our lives.
It really does.
What if we saw it as that chance for, growth?
Yeah.
Not just for ourselves, but for the group as a whole.
It could change everything, couldn't it?
It really could. So we've covered a lot of ground today.
You have.
We talked about bibliobattle, parliamentary debate.
Yeah.
Even that idea of tokenized speaking rights.
It's amazing, right, how many different approaches are out there.
There really are.
Yeah.
To designing communication.
Yeah, and the exciting thing is we've only just scratched the surface.
Right.
There are so many other communication mechanisms out there just waiting to be explored and understood.
And the research is ongoing.
Oh, absolutely.
Who knows what new insights they're going to uncover.
Yeah.
About how these mechanisms work, how they affect us, how we can use them to create, more effective and meaningful communication experiences.
It's a field that's just constantly evolving.
Yeah.
And I think, as we deepen our understanding of these design principles, we're going to open up all these possibilities for collaboration and creativity.
It's like we're on the cusp of this communication revolution.
I think we are.
Moving beyond, those old, tired ways of interacting.
Right.
And into something much more intentional and human-centered.
Absolutely.
Maybe someday we'll even crack the code of that communication genome.
Wouldn't that be amazing?
That you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
Imagine being able to just design these communication systems that are perfectly tailored to the needs of any group or situation.
That would be a game changer.
It really would.
Yeah.
But even without having that whole genome mapped out, we can still apply what we've learned today to make a difference in our own lives.
Absolutely. We can be more intentional about how we communicate.
Right.
Experiment with different approaches. Pay attention to what's working, what's not working.
And maybe the most important takeaway is to remember that communication, it's about more than just conveying information.
That's right.
It's about connecting with other human beings.
Yeah.
Fostering understanding and creating those shared experiences.
Well said. Well said.
So, listener, we hope this deep dive has given you a lot to think about.
Yeah, a lot to ponder.
What stood out to you?
Yeah, what resonated.
Keep an eye out for those communication mechanisms.
Right.
Those that you encounter in your own life. Think about the design principles that we talked about today.
Think about how they could be applied.
Yeah, how could they be improved?
And don't be afraid to try something new.
Right.
Experiment with different ways of communicating.
Yeah.
See what happens.
You may be surprised by what you discover.
You might just invent the next great communication mechanism.
The possibilities are endless.
They are.
So until next time, keep exploring, keep connecting.
And keep diving deep.
We'll see you on the next deep dive.